Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to Utility Sports. Today, we're going to be doing our first complete full first round mock draft rendition here on the channel for the 2021 NBA draft. So if this is something you guys are interested in moving forward, we're going to be doing a lot of different NBA draft coverage stuff. I do a ton of writing and watching and studying and looking at the film of these young players as they're coming into the NBA, what transition they're going to be making. And this is a perfect time for it. It is Selection Sunday currently. We have some conference championship games finishing up today. LSU had a very good game against Alabama in which Alabama pulled that game out just slightly. That was a really fun game to watch, and a whole bunch of others. And this is the best spot to be in order to get the up-to-date coverage on all these NBA prospects, really what they're going to be able to bring to the table in the NBA and what I kind of see for their future and where they could go possibly in the NBA draft. So make sure you guys are subscribed here. And now let's jump into today's video looking at the draft order here. We have the Minnesota Timberwolves headlining the draft. OKC, that pick is from Houston. That would actually stay with Houston. That's top 4 protected. This website does not have that correct. Oklahoma City themselves find themselves picking 9th now after a few good games from Aleksej Pokusevski. Once he's been up in the NBA. The Houston Rockets, this pick is from Portland from that Robert Covington deal. They have their pick at 23, also have their pick at 3 currently. The Mavericks, their pick is owed to the New York Knicks. That is currently sitting at 20th. And this is kind of what we're seeing right now for how the current standings are shaping up in the NBA. So let's jump into today's video. We're going to be doing the full first round here on the channel. Hopefully you guys do enjoy it. And now with the first overall pick, the Minnesota Timberwolves are on the clock. And there's really only one right answer here, regardless of who gets the first overall pick. And that's going to be Cade Cunningham, the point guard out of Oklahoma State. He's 6'7", is an NBA ready body. Some questions for me. Doesn't have super elite end athleticism. I don't think he's going to be the best athlete in the NBA. And I also have questions about his defense and really what he provides on that end of the floor. He kind of reminds me of Luka Doncic in terms of, he uses his body pretty well to cut off drives. But other than that, doesn't give you a lot of, real passing lane presence. It's not going to block a lot of shots at that position, despite a bigger frame at point guard. He's going to be more of an offensive style player, but he's really shown for the Oklahoma State team this year what he's been able to bring. He's turned that team into a legit team that has a shot in March Madness here. Could walk away out of the bracket. I wouldn't be surprised if they're a team that goes as far as maybe the Elite 8 or possibly Final 4 with Cade Cunningham running the show. They did lose to Texas in the Big 12 championship game, but Cade Cunningham all season long has looked very good in that backcourt next to Isaac Likely. I think that Oklahoma State's been very good this year in a lot of different ways, and Cade Cunningham's the big reason why they play with a high tempo. Cade Cunningham's going to fit right into the NBA game. Up and down, can pace and space, does a lot of different things. His shooting's translated better at Oklahoma State than I thought it would out of high school, and he's been a magnificent college player, and he's going to continue to be a magnificent player in the NBA. He is the first pick here for the Minnesota Timberwolves or whoever does win the lottery. And remember, these picks are subject to change once we get further in the season. The order is going to shake up a little bit, and then the lottery is going to ultimately give us that real good shift at the end that will finally get the hardened, rock-solid order that we will have. Now at pick 2, we've got the Detroit Pistons here, and they're a team that's very interesting. They spent pick 7 last year on Killian Hayes. They also had 2 other first-round picks, which they utilized on Isaiah Stewart and Isaiah Stewart, and also Sadiq Bey. So they kind of addressed the point guard, the small forward, and the center positions. But I think at this point, they're going to come back, and they're going to be between a few different guys here. Jonathan Kuminga is a really good option. I think Jalen Green has a lot of scouts intrigued with his athleticism, really what he brings to the table in that regard. I think that he's got a lot of upside to him as well. And I'm looking here, and I think that, as 1 second here, I'm having some issues with my screen sharing. There you go. You guys should be able to see this now again. That I think Jalen Green is a guy that they would strongly consider here. I think that they're going to look for some dynamism in their backcourt. And I think he's a good complement to Killian Hayes. Killian Hayes being a left-handed player, more of a shot creator, someone who's going to be a facilitator. Jalen Green functions pretty well off the ball. I have some questions about him on the ball. Doesn't really go to his left very well, but he's very dynamic going to his right as an attacker off the dribble. Also shown ability to get his own shot off in the mid-range area and behind the three-point line. And I'm actually going to opt for Jalen Green going 2nd overall here. I am very high on Jonathan Kuminga, but I think with the Pistons picking 2, Jalen Green does make a lot of sense. This is one of those where they would opt for the guy with a little bit higher upside. as a potential franchise level player there in Detroit. If the website will let me take him, there we go. Now at pick 3, it says Oklahoma City here, guys, but this is actually the Houston Rockets pick. They would be here at this spot grabbing whichever player that they find to be the best fit for them. And to me, that's going to be Jonathan Kuminga. Evan Mobley's here. He's a great player. Jalen Suggs, another very good player out of Gonzaga. The two of those guys have been extremely impactful in college this year. Evan Mobley been so great for USC. Jalen Suggs leading Gonzaga to the #1 seed all year long. They haven't lost a game in over 365 days. But Kuminga's got a little bit more NBA upside to me. He's a bigger frame, looked really, really good for G League Ignite, and I think he's going to be a guy that Houston could look at being their franchise guy long-term, and also fits better with their roster. Christian Wood, he's going to be there long-term. He's going to be an untouchable guy. I expect John Wall to not really have a trade market. I expect him to either get bought out or to be staying in Houston. That kind of complicates things for Jalen Suggs, especially since they have Kevin Porter Jr. there. Kuminga fits more naturally into that wing position for them, and he would be the direction that they would opt to go at the 3rd overall pick if they do stay up in that top 4. Otherwise, that pick does convey to Oklahoma City. Now at pick 4, we have the Orlando Magic, and their team, they continue to slide a little bit in the standings. It's just been a tough year for them. Nikola Vucevic, all-star level player, just hasn't had a lot around him with those injuries. Jonathan Isaac's out. Markelle Fultz is out. And this is a really good situation now for Orlando. They get to maybe find a way to put a star player into that offense, into that team that they badly need. And at this point, I'm going to opt for Evan Mobley. Their draft history suggests that they're going to go this way. Maybe they look at moving on from Aaron Gordon. Evan Mobley, an absolute stud defensively, and has a really good offensive face-up game that I think he can develop into, and a pretty solid back-to-the-basket game, not to mention he's going to be an elite role man in the NBA. His athleticism is exactly where the NBA is heading. Think Bam Adebayo a little bit with what Evan Mobley's going to be. That's going to be a comparison that you're going to start to hear thrown and floated around pretty frequently. I think Evan Mobley in Orlando, despite Vucevic probably staying around there, still does make a lot of sense. He can play the 4 and the 5. Very versatile player, and he's a great defensive player as well. Pick 5, now we got the Cleveland Cavaliers here, and they're another team with a little bit of an interesting situation. They have a very loaded backcourt, Garland, Sexton, 2 guys that they don't want to move on from. They probably see both of those players as long-term pieces. Isaac Okoro, he's going to be another long-term piece for them. They just spent their 1st-round pick on him last year. And at this point, the front court gets a little bit more questionable. Jarrett Allen, he'll be there, but they don't really have a true power forward at this point. I think that they are going to be looking for more of a true wing at this spot in the draft, which is really kind of a tough spot to be if you are Cleveland, because Jalen Suggs is the best player available now on the board. And I think, in a lot of ways, if you're Cleveland, you should be looking for the best player available. But I don't see any way that Suggs can really coexist with Garland, Sexton. They'd almost have to have a plan for moving one of those guys if Suggs was the selection. Maybe this is a real trade-down scenario, but I think at this point, Jalen Johnson's actually a pretty safe selection. I know that in some boards he might be sliding a little bit. However, I think that he is a legit top 10 worthy pick. He's a very athletic player, gives you a lot of different options and versatility as an offensive player. He can shoot the ball, he can put it on the deck, get to the rim. And I think he's going to be a unique power forward in the NBA. I think he gives Cleveland a pretty good fit into what they already have as they look at trying to build this thing up a little bit longer with Kobe Allard there as their GM. Pick 6, now we got the Washington Wizards, and things just haven't meshed there. Bradley Beal, will he be on his way out? I don't necessarily think that, but I wouldn't be surprised either if they do end up pulling off a trade in the next 12 months or so. So really, it's going to be about hitting the reset button here in Washington and going best player available. That is Jalen Suggs out of Gonzaga. At this point, pick 6, this is probably the low end of where Jalen Suggs would go in the NBA draft. Phenomenal talent, really good at getting to the rim. He's a high-quality combo guard, someone who can be a facilitator, but also someone who can put the ball on the deck, get to the rim, score himself. I think he's got a really high ceiling in the NBA, but also a very, very high floor. He's going to be very impactful in the league regardless of where he goes. And I think Washington would feel pretty lucky to get Jalen Suggs here, regardless of who's on their roster now at this point. At pick 7, we have the Sacramento Kings here, and they're a team. They're always constantly up here in the top 10 looking for some answers, and front court is really where they need to be looking the most. There's a lot of different assets here, different guys that could be very interesting in a lot of regards. Scottie Barnes, Florida State kid, very solid defensively, gives you some two-way optionality. Zaire Williams, a guy who's a versatile playmaker, kind of reminds you of a triple-double machine at that power forward position. He's going to be able to play the 3 or the 4 in the NBA. I think he's a legit option for them in that front court. I'm interested to see if Harrison Barnes does get moved at the deadline. There's rumors that the Boston Celtics are very interested in him. He would fit very well into that trade exception. So I think Sacramento here has some options available. Corey Kispert, a shooter option, because I don't think Buddy Hield's going to be there very long term. I think that they could look to add some shooting, floor spacing around De'Aaron Fox and also Tyrese Halliburton. That does make some sense to me. Looking around here at Moses Moody, another high-end shooter. He makes some sense. Kai Jones and also Greg Brown, both Texas kids, make a lot of sense in this regard. And that's actually where I'm going to opt now at this point, is I'm going to opt with Greg Brown III out of Texas. He is a unique athlete, a guy who can put the ball on the deck from the perimeter. He's also a guy who can get his own shot off, step back 3. He's very athletic as well. He's kind of a unique athlete in a lot of different ways. And I think Sacramento is going to look at a swing big type of pick. And Greg Brown is that. He's going to be a guy who flies up boards with the perceived potential around his name. I think that he's going to be a guy that we see probably in the top 10 for sure come NBA draft night. Pick 8, we got the New Orleans Pelicans here. And they're a team that is also very unique and interesting with their situation. Lonzo Ball, will he be a Pelican long-term? At this point, I don't find it likely he does get moved. It's going to be Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson. That's the building block there in New Orleans. So how do you find pieces that fit around that? One key issue, and we've been talking about this on the channel before the season even started, after they had made the move for Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe. What is their spacing? They don't have real floor spacing options on this team. They need to find someone who's going to provide that, and that's going to be Moses Moody here, the freshman out of Arkansas. He's a very good floor spacer. He's also someone who's able to get his own shot off the dribble on the perimeter. Now, does he have some flaws? Sure. He doesn't get to the rim very consistently. He has, a little bit of a tendency to settle on that jump shot. But if you're looking at it from New Orleans' perspective, that's perfectly fine. You've already got Zion Williamson and Steven Adams, who are kind of more lane-oriented players scoring at the rim. Brandon Ingram gives you a good hybrid of both. You've got Lonzo Ball, one of the best passers in the NBA, and now you've got Moses Moody in there, someone who's going to space the floor, be able to get his own shot off on the perimeter. I think that kind of complements that team a lot more, and he's going to be a nice J.J. Redick replacement long-term there in New Orleans. Now at pick 9, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder. This is actually their first real pick now in the draft at this point, since the earlier pick did not convey to them, went to Houston, since it was still top 4. And again, Oklahoma City here, they're going to have the opportunity to swing and miss on a player. They've got so many assets. They're going to take best risk possible in a lot of different places. I think that one could be Zaire Williams here. I think he's a very interesting player in a lot of different ways. I talked about his versatility as a playmaker. I think that could be something that Sam Presti really sells himself on here in Oklahoma City. They've got to find some pieces. I think that Pokusevski's starting to prove himself as an NBA caliber player, but I don't know if he's necessarily a superstar quite yet at this point. I don't think he might. I'm not sure he's going to really develop into that. The other thing that they could look at this point is maybe trying to find someone who can play as a combo guard next to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Keon Johnson out of Tennessee is a good example of that. Also, Jaden Springer out of Tennessee. Those are two guys that are going to be, lottery type players. I'm not sure if they're going to ultimately go in the lottery, but I think those are guys that would be in play possibly here. But at this point, I'm going to opt for Zaire Williams to Oklahoma City. He's a very good passer, really well-rounded game, gives you a lot of different things. Not necessarily the best shooter. He has to grow in that area as a consistent half-court scorer, but Oklahoma City is going to be patient with him. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is emerging as one of the best half-court scorers in the NBA, having 87% of his baskets be non-assisted. You need to get him some help there by putting a playmaker around him, and Zaire Williams is going to take some of that pressure off of him. At Big Ten, we've got the Chicago Bulls here, and like other teams like the New Orleans Pelicans, they've got a young core there. They've got some pieces that they really do like moving forward. That's probably Patrick Williams, Zach LaVine, Kobe White. The front court feels a little bit less certain to me at this point. However, I don't know if there's a real clear answer now at this point of the draft in a way that they could go about really addressing this. I think that they opt now for Kai Jones here out of Texas. He's a bigger player, gives you a little bit of versatility. He's still very athletic and a guy who can protect the rim a little bit. I think that they're looking to add some front court depth in a lot of different areas, and I think that he is someone that does make quite a bit of sense now at this point for Chicago Bulls. At pick 11, we got the Toronto Raptors here, and they're a team I would be surprised if they do end up staying in the lottery. But at this point, this is where they are. And they got to be looking at long-term replacements for Kyle Lowry. And they've also got to be looking at some front court help, specifically the small forward center position, especially when it comes to half-court production. They need to find some guys who can space the floor better for them. They need to find some guys who could, really produce in the half court. And someone who's been struggling to do that so far this year has been BJ Boston. But if Toronto was up here, I think they would take the ultimate swing and miss chance here in the lottery and roll the dice on BJ Boston. This is a rare opportunity for them to get a player who was very high ranked in his recruiting class. And Toronto, they have been known to really go a long way in helping players progress and start to produce at the NBA level. I think that they would be very confident they could get BJ Boston's career on track. Now, do I think he's a lottery level player? No, I do not personally, but I'm just mocking what I think would be a possibility. And if Toronto's here at this point at pick 11, BJ Boston does make a lot of sense in that regard. I think that is the way that they would opt to go. Pick 12, we have the Indiana Pacers here. A little bit of a slide from them lately, but they're a very good team. Also would be surprising if they do not make it into the NBA playoffs, especially with Karis LeVert returning to lineup. I would be pretty shocked with that, in my opinion. So where do they look to go? I think that one key thing for them would be maintaining shooters around Domantas Sabonis. And there is a very good shooter left on the board, Corey Kispert out of Gonzaga. I know he's a senior. I know his potential is not extremely high. I'm not suggesting that it is, but he's a guy who can really space the floor and he can really shoot the ball, shooting over 40% on his career from three there at Gonzaga. And I mean, he's having a career year this year. He's absolutely been shooting the lights out of the ball. He's a big part of why Gonzaga is as productive and successful as they are. And he comes into Indiana. I think that makes a lot of sense in a lot of different ways for spacing the floor around Sabonis and also getting guys who are just NBA level players who are going to help produce. And when it comes to winning, I think Corey Kispert goes a long way in helping Indiana move forward. Pick 13, we've got the Memphis Grizzlies here. A little bit of an up and down season. They've been badly missing Jaren Jackson this year. Their team, once Jaren Jackson's back, they're going to get on the right track. But at this point, I think they're really looking for some guys at that shooting guard or small forward position who can put the ball in the hole and also can defend on the other end of the floor. And that's going to be Scottie Barnes here. Scottie Barnes has a unique opportunity to be a really good two-way player in this draft class. This is a very strong draft class, and I think Scottie Barnes out of Florida State, they're very disciplined. The Florida State Seminoles are. They produce a lot of good defensive players, Devin Vassell, Patrick Williams being two of the most recent, but also looking back at Jonathan Isaac and some of the other ones that they produced there. Scottie Barnes, he's going to be a perfect fit there in Memphis if he's on the board when they are selecting on draft night. I wouldn't be surprised by this pick at all. I think Grizzlies fans should be pretty happy to see this. Pick 14. We have the Golden State Warriors here now. And at this point, the Warriors are going to be looking for possibly a trade down to try and get an asset back. This is a pick that maybe they flaunt in front of the Wizards for a guy like Bradley Beal. But here as well, they've got to be looking at what they have, what they don't have on this roster. And I just don't think they have enough guys who can really handle the rock when Steph Curry doesn't have the ball. I think that they struggle when he's not on the floor. I think that they struggle when other players have the ball and he's on the floor. If it's not Draymond Green or Steph with the ball, they're just not really getting a lot out of their offense. Keon Johnson out of Tennessee, I think he is a very high upside player in this class. He's a bigger guard, can really handle the rock, good athleticism, good end-to-end quickness, and he's going to be a guy who can come in out of Tennessee. Watching him, I think he brings a lot. He knows how to use his body, positions himself well, can attack the rim, needs to grow as a shooter. Not a very good shooter yet at this point. I believe he's shooting 31% from three in the college season. But the Warriors are looking for some dynamic athletes, someone who can handle the ball, play off of Curry. Part of me wonders if they're regretting not drafting LaMelo Ball, but the other part of me thinks that James Wiseman's going to be a really good fit for them long-term, and now they need to come back in this draft and find a way to complement Steph Curry and Klay Thompson in that backcourt with Keon Johnson. Now at pick 15, we got the Atlanta Hawks here. Trae Young, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Kevin Huerter, Cam Reddish, Clint Capella, Danilo Gallinari, they all factor to be long-term players here for the Atlanta Hawks. The eyes are really on John Collins. Will he be back? What are they going to do with him? And that's a great question. I think he's going to be a very hot name this trade deadline. I think a lot of teams are going to be very interested in pulling the trigger on him, possibly the Dallas Mavericks. For sure, the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to be interested. So I think he's a really intriguing name to watch at this point. But now for Atlanta, they have a really wide range of ways that they could go about this draft. Part of me thinks that they're going to be looking for shooting, someone who can space the floor as well. But the other part of me thinks that they really need to be looking at ways to get better defensively and on that end of the floor, because they struggle in that regard. They just did fire their head coach, Lloyd Pierce. I'm not really sure who's going to be around for them, but I think that they have to find ways to really improve this team. And there's no clear-cut way that I think at this point in the draft that they could really make that kind of move. Look for them to maybe be aggressive in the trade market, floating this first-round pick out to other teams, trying to find ways to get better. They have Onyeka Okongwu there long-term. He's going to go a long way in helping their front court defensively. At this point, I'm going to opt for James Bouknight. I think he's a very well-rounded player. I think he gives you a lot. We saw how successful he was at UConn this year. Can attack the rim, can get his shot off. Also an underrated playmaker in a lot of ways. And I think that Bogdanovic, his injury this year, is kind of limited what the Hawks team is producing offensively. I think having the ball to Trae Young's hands just a little bit more often, running him off of screens with what his shooting ability looks like, could help this team. I think Bouknight takes a little bit more pressure off. And at some point, they're going to have to start making decisions about some of these young guys. And I think Bouknight comes in, gives them a little bit of versatility. And I think that he is the option for them now at this point. Pick 16, we got the New York Knicks here. They also have another pick coming up at pick 20. And for them, you got to be looking at that wing position, finding someone who can run next to RJ Barrett, and also looking at that point guard spot and seeing, is Immanuel Quickley really the long-term point guard, or is he going to be a very nice player off the bench for us? Finding another guy in here could help them go a long way in really improving this roster if they can get someone who's a quality guard or a quality wing. Those are the two options I think that they have ahead of them that they need to find and really take the risk on. I think they're going to opt for Jaden Springer here at this point at pick 16. He's a guy with a lot of upside, uses his body well, contorts in the lane, can take contact, can play through contact at the rim. He's a little bit of a streaky shooter. I know he's shooting pretty well from three this year, but he's definitely a guy who, when he's not on, he can hurt a team in a lot of ways. But I think at pick 16, he does make a lot of sense for the New York Knicks. He's really emerged lately for Tennessee, and he's going to be a guy that Tom Thibodeau and the New York Knicks can maybe rely on the half-court offense a little bit more than they're getting out of some of their other pieces on that roster. Now at pick 17, we got the Boston Celtics here, and they just have been a little underwhelming this year. I think that they're going to be really looking at the front court depth, but like I've been saying, the front court depth in this year's class is not very good. I think that they also have to be looking at that point guard position and seeing, can we find a point guard who really fits what we need out of them long-term, and that's going to be Davion next year. I think he really helped his stock during the G League season. He is an NBA-ready guard. He's a little bit bigger, 6'5", and he's got about 225-pound frame. He's a little bit more of a thick guard, uses his body very well, though. Manipulates the pick and roll, has very good eyes while running an NBA offense, and he's a guy, he can look off defenses, put the ball in the shooting pocket, and I think he's a perfect complement to that Boston Celtics team. Brad Stevens' team defenses have been very good and very well known to help some of these poor guards defensively. Kemba Walker, Isaiah Thomas, two of the latest, who aren't really great defensive guards, but the Celtics stay a very good defensive team in spite of those. Davion next, he's not going to be the best defensive guard either. Questions on his athleticism specifically are going to limit what he brings to the table, but the Celtics grab him here at pick 17. He's a true playmaker, someone who can read the floor, and I think he's a perfect fit with Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum moving forward. Pick 18, we have the Charlotte Hornets here. LaMelo Ball, he has been the highlight of the season for the Charlotte Hornets, and they're another team. They badly need front court help, but there just isn't front court help here. So where do they go now at this point? Maybe they go and take another huge swing and miss on a guy from the NBL. This is Josh Giddey from the New Zealand Breakers, and I'm telling you right now, I really like what Josh Giddey brings to the table. He is a 6'7" guard, plays with pretty good feel, doesn't quite have the handle that LaMelo Ball has. That's my biggest concern about him. A little bit more of a back-to-the-basket guard, isn't comfortable facing up quite as often as some of these other guards are, like Luka Doncic. I think Giddey's going to be compared quite often to some of these bigger guards. but his handle's a little less refined. He still has some room to grow, but I think bringing him into Charlotte is an interesting scenario for them, especially when there isn't a clear-cut center. That makes a lot of sense for them to grab now at this point. Pick 19, we got the Miami Heat here. They have played themselves back into the playoff picture. No surprise there from me. And I think that one thing they're going to be looking for is someone who could probably put the ball in the hole. And that is going to be Josh Christopher out of Arizona State. He is a guy a little bit streaky as a shooter. Wasn't shooting the best from three this year, but he's got real half-court skills. He can put the ball on the deck. He can put the ball in the hole. Does it in a wide variety of ways. He's a three-level scorer. Like I said, a little inconsistent from three, but he's got all the confidence in the world, and the Miami Heat need somebody else who can put the ball in the basket moving forward. Goran Dragic's getting a little bit older. Kendrick Nunn really hasn't cemented himself as a starting NBA player. And I think now at this point, they need someone else who can complement Jimmy Butler in the half court. And I think Josh Christopher has the potential to be that guy. Pick 20, now we have the New York Knicks yet again. They opted for Jaden Springer at pick 16. Now here, they're going to be looking for some more depth either at that point guard position or that wing position. Jaden Springer, kind of a combo guard. You could play him in a variety of different ways. But I think now at this point, they would be best suited looking for a point guard. And an interesting one to me here is Davion Mitchell. This might be the highest you guys have seen Davion Mitchell go in a mock draft yet at this point. But he comes from Baylor, and he can really, really defend. And I think he makes a lot of sense in Tom Thibodeau's system as a defensive-minded point guard. He was Big 12 all-defense. He was the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. And he is a very, very good defensive player. Watching him in the Big 12 tournament against Oklahoma State and Cade Cunningham, he made Cade Cunningham work very hard in that game. Really a presence on the defensive side of the ball. And I think he's got a little bit of upside offensively, too. He can manipulate a pick and roll as a point guard. He gives you a little bit of everything. He can read the floor. He's not a selfish player, and he has the ability to pick his spots when he should look to score and when he should be a facilitator. I think he has a pretty solid future in the NBA. I don't think he's ever going to be a superstar or anything like that, but I think he's going to be a guy that can carve out a 10 to 12-year career pretty easily in the NBA with the hustle he brings and his defensive presence, something that Tom Thibodeau would really value there in New York at that point guard position. Pick 21, we got the San Antonio Spurs here. They've had a very good season in a lot of ways. DeMar DeRozan having another great season for the San Antonio Spurs. They're moving on from LaMarcus Aldridge now. So at this point, it's about trying to complement some of their young pieces, DeJounte Murray, Keldon Johnson, Lonnie Walker, and trying to bridge forward. They also have Devin Vassell, who they drafted last year. And I think that there's a wide range of ways that they could go here. At this point, I'm going to opt for Day'Ron Sharpe out of UNC. He's been a little disappointing this year. I don't think he's necessarily the greatest pick at this point, but I think that they're going to be really worried about their front court depth. They need to get someone behind Jakob Poeltl. Rudy Gay is a free agent this offseason. It's very possible the Spurs could lose quite a few of their contributors, and they're going to have to look at ways of getting younger and getting better. And I think Day'Ron Sharpe is going to bring a little bit of athleticism into that front court, gives them more of an offensive option than a guy like Jakob Poeltl has been for them so far. Poeltl very good on the defensive end of the floor. Day'Ron Sharpe gives you a little bit of shot blocking potential, and also someone who can really run the floor in transition and function as a pick and roll screener, as a role guy. I think that he has some good potential there, and I think a fit with the San Antonio Spurs does make a lot of sense. Denver Nuggets now at pick 22. They're a team known to have taken a lot of risks on guys when the potential is there. Keontae Johnson, he's a guy. The medicals haven't scared the Denver Nuggets away from teams. Now, Keontae Johnson's situation is a little bit different. He collapsed during the middle of a game there for Florida. He's been back with the team, but not practicing, not playing. Are they willing to take the risk on a guy like Keontae Johnson? That I'm not sold on. I think that they're more willing to take a risk on a guy maybe like Scottie Lewis, Tre Mann, or Cam Thomas here. Some guys who can really, really score the ball and in a lot of different ways give teams a little bit of problems with what they're able to bring in the half-court offense. Also, Ayo Dosunmu's fallen here. They're going to opt for Ayo Dosunmu. That's actually, I forgot that he wasn't on the list here, and I had forgotten about him. I'm not going to lie to you guys about that. That's pretty bad. He probably goes a little bit higher here, maybe around 17, 18. It is possible, though, that we could see him fall on draft day. Nuggets grab him here at 22. There's no way he would fall any further than 22 in the NBA draft. 23 now, we've got the Houston Rockets on the board. And they're a team, like I said earlier, they're looking for some potential upside. They grabbed Jonathan Kuminga earlier. I think that now at this point, this is where we see a guy like Scottie Lewis or Cam Thomas go. And I'm actually going to opt for Cam Thomas. He had played pretty well today in the SEC championship game, hit some really big shots. His range has really expanded this past year from his transition from high school into college. And I think he's a guy who has a lot of potential moving forward. I think the Rockets, we're seeing a real transition from the John Wall, Victor Oladipo, PJ Tucker team that we see to probably a Cam Thomas, Kevin Porter Jr., Jonathan Kuminga-led squad. It's going to be a youth movement there in Houston. Everything's going to be built around Christian Wood, but I think that's what they need to do, getting Cam Thomas a pick-and-roll ball handler. Sure, he has some issues as a facilitator, but maybe Kevin Porter Jr. becomes their real long-term point guard. Cam Thomas comes off the bench or functions as the shooting guard, as a scorer, kind of what we're seeing with James Harden and Kyrie Irving in Brooklyn. Not that these guys are on their level, but it doesn't necessarily matter if Cam Thomas is playing point guard or shooting guard. He's going to be scoring the basketball. Pick 24, we got the Milwaukee Bucks here. A little up and down season this year for them, but they're focused on the playoffs, and a player that could help them come playoff time, maybe a guy like Sharife Cooper. He is a dynamic playmaker. He's a dynamic scorer, and that's where the way that they're going to go now at this point. They find a legit point guard, someone who can really pass the basketball. I think that's his greatest strength. Got some questions about his shot selection, but getting him into Mike Budenholzer's system, that would do wonders for a guard like Sharife Cooper. He's played very well this year for Auburn. He's had a lot of statistical success. I'm telling you right now, though, the eye test doesn't necessarily match up with that when you watch him in real games, but I think Milwaukee here at 24 is a good landing spot for him. I think that's about where his range is going to be in the NBA draft, probably somewhere from 20 to 30. And he's also going to be right around the area where some of these contenders are looking for guys who maybe come off the bench early, give them a little bit of a spark, and Sharife Cooper will be that for the Milwaukee Bucks. Pick 25, we have the Los Angeles Clippers. They're another team. They need to be looking at their long-term future here. Kawhi Leonard, will he re-sign with them? I think so at this point. Paul George is under contract. So really, how do you find players that fit around this? And they're actually going to opt for Tre Mann. They already have his brother Terrence Mann on the team, and they're going to go with Tre Mann now at this point. My reasoning, he's a point guard who can get his shot off at any time on the shot clock. That's really valuable, and the Clippers need that. Patrick Beverley isn't giving that to them. Reggie Jackson, he's been terrible for them since they acquired him. I mean, he's just not what, he was really supposed to be there in Los Angeles. Terrence Mann, I like when he's been getting run for them. I think that Amir Coffey has a little bit of upside for them. And Tre Mann kind of fits into what they look to draft here in the late first round or second round often. Tre Mann is going to be the selection here for the Los Angeles Clippers. Fills a positional need for them, and I think is a good long-term option for these Clippers. Pick 26, we have the Los Angeles Lakers here. And everything that they're doing needs to be centered around LeBron James and finding good NBA-ready players that are going to be able to contribute to what this squad is. And at that point, I think that they would opt for Jared Butler out of Baylor. He's a very good player, Big 12 Player of the Year, and I think he's got a lot of NBA-ready minutes in him. Now, do I think his potential is super high? No. Do I think he's a great, great player for the NBA standards? No. He's a great college player who's going to be able to come in, give an NBA team minutes early on, and he's going to be a very nice complementary piece to a competitive team, and the Lakers are going to pull the trigger on that with Jared Butler. Pick 27, we have the Brooklyn Nets here now. Kyrie Irving, James Harden, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant. Those are the key pieces moving forward. DeAndre Jordan, yes, they'll want to keep him around. Spencer Dinwiddie, he'll probably get moved this trade deadline. So what kind of really fits around those guys? I think I could see them now at this point really looking at Scottie Lewis. He's a very lengthy defender, a guy who can have some offensive upside to him. I think that they're going to look to maybe take a risk here at the end of the first round. Either that or they're going to look to maybe move this pick. I think Ochai Agbaji makes a lot of sense too. Kansas junior, he almost came out last year, decided to recommit back to Kansas for his junior season. I think that he could be in the cards here for them. Matthew Hurt, another guy that does make a lot of sense. He can stretch the floor as a power forward, shot the ball very well for Duke this past year. Now, do I think he has very high upside either? No. A lot of these guys that are going here between picks 20 and 30 don't have high upside, and that's not necessarily why they're going to be in the cards here. Matthew Hurt spacing the floor, I think that'll be a valuable piece for the Brooklyn Nets. Moving forward, they're going to opt to go in that direction. Phoenix Suns now picking at 28. they're going to opt for Caleb Love here. He's a guy with upside in the half court. He has probably the strongest season out of North Carolina, out of any Tar Heel this year. He hit a game-winning shot the other day. I think he's got a good upside as well in half court, but I don't necessarily see him as a real, game changer in the NBA. I think the Suns grab him here. Fits into kind of what their needs are moving forward. They need someone who can come off the bench at that 2 or 3 position, be a little impactful, and Caleb Love will be that for them. Pick 29, we have the Philadelphia 76ers here. Joel Embiid playing at an MVP level. Ben Simmons at a Defensive Player of the Year level. And Daryl Morey and Elton Brand have done a great job finally putting shooters around these guys. Seth Curry, the best pickup of the offseason, that was a low-level buy. Very, very good move for them. Danny Green, another good acquisition. And I think here now at this point, they go for Scottie Lewis, someone who's going to have that two-way potential. They're going to take a risk on him. He hasn't been playing very well for Florida this year, but I think he's a guy, his name recognition will help him stay in the first round, and the Sixers go with Scottie Lewis to help kind of mend that forward position for them long term. Pick 30 now, we have the Utah Jazz. What a wonderful season it has been for Utah. They have been playing really lights out basketball all year long, moving the ball. They had 3 All-Stars this year in Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, and Mike Conley. Rudy Gobert is this system. However, they need to find some other front court players. Royce O'Neal, I think he's going to be a guy that gets a pretty solid contract once his free agency comes around. They need to find someone who can space the floor a little bit to replace him, and also someone who's going to give them some effort on the defensive end of the floor. Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, he's an interesting option here out of Villanova. He's a very impactful player. A lot of Villanova guys are coming from that Jay Wright team. I think that they could also look in a variety of ways. Ochai Agbaji does make a lot of sense to me as well at this point. Let's also look at just some of the forwards that are available in general here, if there's any that jump out to me. Isaiah Todd, he's a high upside pick from the G League. I think that there's a real chance we could see him go. Herb Jones, he had a very great game here in the SEC championship today for Alabama. He, very athletic left-handed player, someone who gives you a lot of defensive presence as well. I could actually see them opting for Herb Jones at this point. He goes 30th overall in our mock draft here. And remember, guys, this is really subject to change. The March Madness is just about to start. Some players' performances will really impact where we see them go at this point. I think Jalen Johnson maybe a little high here at pick 5, but I think he fits kind of what Cleveland's looking for. That's just one example of how some of these things could kind of shake up and move around when the draft order actually gets set. Hope that you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, leave a thumbs up on it. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about this mock draft, and we'll catch you guys in the very next video.